It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, on top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Good evening, Zimbabwe, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of your favorite sports show, ZiFM Sport, on your favorite station, ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station, and we have your team bringing you what should be another exciting edition of sports news. That team is headed by our producer, Sean Tafirenyika, and it's the old strike force, Barry and Mike. We've got a special for you today, but I want to remind you of our musical interludes, which is why we call Wednesday Wacky Wednesday. We have our power play, which kicks off the show, and you don't want to miss out on the sounds of Foo Fighters, and then don't miss out on our play of the day, which comes smack bang in the middle of the show. We have been running a series of specials for you, and today is no different. We continue our recap this week by zoning in on international rugby today, and after 12 weeks of Currie Cup action in South Africa, the semi-finals are on next weekend. We get to talk about and analyze who's who in the zoo as far as South African rugby is concerned. And we'll go stateside. They've got their own unique sporting codes. You know, they call themselves world champions, even though they are domestic champions. Think about baseball, basketball, American football. Let me be specific. Well, today we'll look at two of those sporting codes. We'll look at basketball and, of course, American football. In basketball, LA Lakers have regained their spot at the top of the Western Conference standings after their win over the Houston Rockets early this morning. And in the NFL, with the Super Bowl next month, we're down to 4 games in the divisional round playoffs. This after the Super Wildcard weekend lived up to its billing with upsets and back and forth point fests. We'll also keep you up to date with what's happening in international sport when we take you around the world in 60, as well as the back end of the show when we keep you updated on the major leagues of Europe in the beautiful game. And happy days for United fans. United on top of the standings for the first time after the month of January, or should I say after New Year, since the year 2013. But first, our power play, and as Mike said, the Foo Fighters. This is off their upcoming album. It's a pre-release single. It's called Shame Shame.
The Warriors, the Chevrons, the Cheetahs, the Mighty Warriors, and the Sables. From the pool to the track to the field, we are Team Zimbabwe. The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Why don't you reach out and have a conversation with us online on social media? That's why we are there, to get your opinions, because your opinion matters. At ZiFM Sport is the handle across all the social media platforms that you know and love. We're also there in our individual capacities at Mike Madoda, at Sean Tafirenyika for our producer. And then, of course, the rest of the team is available for you at Chris Midzi, at Gazaman14 for Alois Bunjira, at Mark Pozzo for the big man, and then I'm at Barry Manandi. Right, let's get into it with our local sports news roundup, starting with football, where the Warriors have departed for Cameroon via Ethiopia for the Chan finals, which begin on Saturday. The biannual football tournament, which is only for players plying their trade in their respective domestic leagues, runs until the 7th of February. The Warriors, who had their preparations disturbed by the COVID-19 pandemic after 9 players and 5 officials tested positive 2 weeks ago, will be hoping to punch above their weight in Cameroon. And indeed, the Warriors kick off the tournament against the hosts on Saturday. Good luck to our Warriors. Go Warriors go. On to rugby news now. Zimbabwe Rugby Union will face a tall order to convince man of the moment Tapiwa Mafura to be part of the Sables team for the Rugby World Cup France 2023 qualifiers. Mafura, who has spent most of his playing time in South Africa, has been in top form in the Pro 14 and the Currie Cup across the Limpopo. His exploits in the 2021 Currie Cup have strengthened his chances of being called up for South Africa's senior national team setup, and the Zimbabwe Rugby Union will keep their fingers crossed that the Hwange-born player chooses to play for the country of his birth. The ZRU have been keeping tabs on the player, and last year he was included in former coach Peter de Villiers' provisional Sable squad for the 2019 Rugby World Cup qualifiers, although he didn't make the final squad due to club commitments in South Africa. Let's wrap it up with some athletics news, where coach Sifas Paspamire says they are making encouraging progress with long-distance runners earmarked for qualification to the Olympics. Paspamire is working with a number of athletes, and although they have sent some home to work on individual programs, the coach is pleased athletes are managing to continue with training. He's also hopeful some of the athletes will be able to have their first attempt at the qualification between next month and March.
Hi, I'm JC Krill, Springbok and Blue Bulls backline player. You are listening to ZiFM Sports.
International Sports News Roundup, where the world comes out to play.
Well, we've already had a touch of rugby in our local sports news roundup. The exploits of Tapiwa Mafura, who's doing big things in South Africa. And South African rugby is what we are zoning in on, specifically the Currie Cup. Now, after 12 weeks of Currie Cup action, the semi-finals are on next weekend. The Bulls and Lions will meet in the first of the two Currie Cup semi-finals next Saturday at exactly 2 p.m. Central African time. And eyes will then swing to Newlands in Cape Town for the semi-final between Western Province and the Sharks at 4:30 in the afternoon. And Barry, no surprises there that the four biggest and most successful franchises are making up the semi-finals, and so it should be exciting times for South African rugby fans. The downside is that they can't be in the stadiums to watch.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, look, this is a legacy competition. This is a competition that's been going on for many, many years, and it deserves to have the traditional, the heritage franchises there at the bitter end. So having the Bulls, the Lions, the Western Province, and of course the Sharks still there at the bitter end is a benefit to the competition. The tragedy is that defending champions Cheetahs have dropped out at the pool stages, so we're definitely going to have a new winner. And the Cheetahs have sort of they've lit up this competition in recent years, and it's sad to see them missing, but we'll be hoping that the Lions, in inverted commas, can do the business, because they've been one of the franchises that have played some exciting rugby, and style has been a real part of the conversation of South African rugby lately.
Yeah, Barry, and yes, the defending champions, the Cheetahs, are out, and there will not be any fans in the stadiums. But in terms of TV viewership, the organizer, the South African Rugby Union, certainly will be pleased with the fact that not only do they have the heritage franchises that we talked about, the Bulls, Western Province, the Sharks, as well as the Lions, but the semi-finals are essentially derbies. So you've got the Highveld derby, the Transvaal derby, as it were, the old one, where you got the Bulls from Pretoria taking on the Lions from Johannesburg, and then you got the Coastal derby as well, because there is a rich tradition of competition and rivalry between Cape Town and Durban. So the Sharks are taking on Western Province. So in terms of them getting eyeballs onto the TV rather than bums on seats, they've got a really good product coming up next weekend.
They got a really good product expected next weekend, and thanks for showing your age by calling it the Transvaal derby. I think everybody now knows exactly how old Mike Madoda is.
No, Barry, I'm a keen student of history, Barry, a keen student of history.
We're not going to buy that. The Gauteng derby, let's call it that, in the modern parlance, as it were. So you're absolutely correct in that what that does is it causes eyeballs on TV screens, because obviously you defend your territory, and that it's come out in that fashion. I think the organizers will be licking their chops and knowing that the interest within the competition is going to be extended as a result of that. Also, the fact that we're now going to have a final that pits one of the coastal teams versus one of the Gauteng franchises adds further excitement and makes the final a spectacle, hopefully. And when they run out onto the green grass, hopefully it will be exactly that.
Let's take a look, Barry, at some of the possible tactical approaches that we expect to see next weekend. And one of the things that I have observed with the return of rugby in South Africa is the place kicking. The inclination by teams to punish offences, to punish penalties, especially from distance. And the long-range kicking is going to come to the fore, especially in the semi-finals, because you take a look at players like Frans Steyn, Kerwin Bosch, and Tian Schwanepoel. They have been deadly from anywhere beyond the halfway line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes within the range of their own 10-meter line, they've been able to get it over the post. So, in truth, a long-range kicking becomes a key component. Now, let's look at why that would be. It means that the opposition has got to exercise a higher degree of discipline in areas of the field ordinarily that you wouldn't have to exercise that sort of discipline. So, I think that adds an extra dimension. It's going to certainly add some scoreboard pressure in the sense that you have to get points at regular intervals to stay within the game, because at any point the players that you just mentioned can take it away from you just merely from their boot.
The tactical approach certainly is one to keep an eye out on, but also something of interest, Barry, is the fact that, there isn't any sort of like quick turnaround time because of the scheduling of the matches in the Currie Cup. They have gone for extended periods between matches, so it's no longer compact. It's no longer fast in terms of the pace of the tournament, but there have been anything between sort of like 2 to 3 weeks sometimes for teams to play their next game. And, it sort of like removes an element of unpredictability from the tournament, which has been there in the past, because you always get that debate in tournaments, where one team may play the last quarterfinal and then have to play one of the first two semifinal, or the first semifinal, as it were. I was going to say one of the first two semifinals, but the only two semifinals. So you play the last quarterfinal, and then you play the first semifinal. Even the FIFA World Cup, teams have complained that, okay, if we are playing the last quarterfinal, let's say on a Saturday or on a Sunday, then we have to play the first semi-final, which is maybe on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But an interesting question will be, has it taken away a bit of the edge from teams in terms of form, the form that they bring into the semi-finals?
It certainly has, and I know you point out that it slows down the tournament, yes. But what we've noticed, and we look at the last game between the Bulls and the Lions, it's actually slowed down the games as well, because what you've got is that it's difficult to pick up the intensity. You talked about the momentum of teams, the ability to a quick turnaround, yes, can cause a team to have fatigue. But also a quick turnaround can cause a team to have the momentum going into the next game because they are at their peak conditioning, as it were. So you look at the Bulls in that game against the Lions, they took very slow walks to their lineouts. They had all sorts of team meetings, and that was trying to manage the fatigue factor of the players because they had a 3-week break before they walked into that game. Now let's look at the semi-finals. There's a two-week break until we see the first semi-final played. That means these teams, some of them are going in having had a 2-week break, some 2.5 weeks, and chances are you're going to see these teams trying to manage their workload to try and see if they can build themselves into games. So yes, I think it's given us an interesting conundrum whereby yes, the rest and recovery and recuperation is spot on for the players, but also the fact that you've got another element that's now added where teams are going to be thinking to themselves, no, we don't want to overexert ourselves in these games. So it's an interesting one that we need to watch and see how these teams approach the games.
Well, hopefully the 2-week build-up, Barry, can be a positive one, and it's probably or possibly an opportunity to freshen up and re-energize for the teams. And I think it'll be wrong for us to expect these teams to change their templates, how they've got to the semi-finals. I think it's pretty much the same way that they're going to go. If they've been slow, if they've been deliberate, if they've been very pragmatic about their approach, they're likely to be that, because that has been the template's work. But what the fans want to see, especially if it's a spectacle on TV, they want to see high octane stuff. They want to be entertained. And so South African rugby will be praying for two entertaining semi-finals to head in the final, and hopefully that will be a humdinger for South African fans.
Hi, I'm Trevor Nyakani, the Blue Bulls and Springbok prop, and now you're listening to ZiFM Sports.
Don't forget, in the second half of the show, we will be going stateside, taking a look at what's happening in the world of basketball, and of course, American football. But still on rugby, the Six Nations is back. The 2021 International Rugby Union calendar is set to kick off with the Six Nations as England attempts to defend its crown. Eddie Jones's men will be looking to claim their 8th title since the competition expanded to 6 teams in the year 2000. And Eddie Jones has pretty much he's fitted seamlessly into this competition, Mike, since taking up the job in England. He's been quite imperious in this competition, winning it quite a few times, and he wants to go one better and defend his crown this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got the team, he's got the players to do that, Barry. But you and I, of course, will be the first ones to say that it's a lot easier in the north than it is in the south, where you're up against the All Blacks and you're up against the might of the Springboks, the world champions, and a vastly improved Argentina. When you're up against the likes of, with all due respect, Italy, the likes of Wales, the likes of Ireland, they're not as strong. Scotland, they're not as strong as the challenge that is posed by the All Blacks. So England, being perhaps the most dominant force in Northern Hemisphere rugby, certainly will get into this tournament as favourites. But we saw them stutter across the line, Barry, in that end-of-year tournament, that autumn tournament, where they struggled to beat a third team that the French put out. And that will give hope to the likes of France, and it will keep them interested in this tournament to say, you know what, if some of our French players can take England all the way into add extra time and really make them work and sweat for victory, it means that when we call back our big boys, our star players, we should be able to challenge for this title. So I don't think England is going to have it all their own way.
Absolutely, and it all gets underway on the weekend of the 6th and 7th of February. That's Saturday and Sunday. And the team you mentioned, Mike, is starting its campaign. That's France, is starting its campaign against Italy. England themselves will take on Scotland. Those matches are on Saturday, the 6th of February. And then on the 7th of February, that's a Sunday, Wales will take on Ireland. Ireland themselves, just a brief note on these ones, Mikey. They were there right at the bitter end of the last competition. They want to go one better this time.
Yeah, absolutely, Barry. And of course, they're coached by Andy Farrell. He is, of course, a former England international. And he'll be looking, Barry, to sort of like better the legacy of Schmidt, the previous coach, who did so well with the Irish, brought them from mediocrity to a team that was challenging the best in world rugby. But it starts with the Six Nations, because if you can start winning the Six Nations, if you can start dominating in the Northern Hemisphere, then you give yourself a chance to at least say, you know what, we can stand up to the All Blacks, we can stand up to the Springboks.
Well, sports and indeed rugby is very different without fans in the stadium, but one thing we can be glad about is that it's happening.
Hi, I'm JC Kriel, Springbok and Blue Bulls backline player. You are listening to ZiFM Sports.
Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
Our journey around the world in 60 takes off down under, where Australia coach Justin Langer gave under fire skipper Tim Payne his 100% support and blasted criticism of Steve Smith as absolute rubbish after a backlash against the pair's behaviour in the drawn third test against India in Sydney. Payne's captaincy has been questioned after he launched an ugly verbal tirade at India's Ravichandran Ashwin, and Smith was accused of foul play after appearing to scuff up batsman Rishabh Pant's guard at the crease during a tense final day. But an indignant Langer was having none of it. Over to Malaysia. Pre-season MotoGP practice sessions set for next month in Malaysia were cancelled by organisers as the coronavirus pandemic pushed the country into a state of emergency. In a statement, MotoGP said that the events scheduled for February 14th to the 16th and 19th to the 21st have been cut due to logistical problems relating to COVID-19. Malaysia declared a state of emergency on Tuesday as fears grow that its health system is close to being overwhelmed after China and Japan took measures against localized clusters. Touching down in the United States of America, where Donald Trump is preparing to vacate the White House and Mrs. Biden has sent in the decor lady to take measurements on the curtains. And in that country, history-making Masters runner-up Cameron Smith of Australia and 2020 PGA Championship winner Colin Morikawa are excited to see Augusta National's plans for limited spectators at the major showdown in 3 months' time. Augusta National chairperson Fred Ridley announced the club's plan to allow a limited number of fans to attend the 85th Masters in April with COVID-19 safety measures in place. Morikawa, a 23-year-old American, captured his first major title last August at Harding Park in San Francisco and hoped the Masters plans might signal a gradual return for fans across all PGA Tour events. It's a difficult one, this one, Barry Hay, to just fathom how they're going to do it logistically. How do you keep fans separate? How do you keep them observing social distance, especially those galleries that always gather around the holes, especially around the 18, the tee-off gallery on the first? How are they going to do it?
Yeah, it's very tough because you can't see it happen on the basis that watching golf is all about the vantage point. So if you're trying to get to the vantage point, chances are you're going to be in contact with people. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how this experiment works. But in truth, I don't see it working.
From the front of the grid to the back of the net, it's ZiFM Sport.
All right, time for us to head to the land of a star-spangled banner. As Mike said, there's going to be some changes at the White House. There's also been some changes.
The star-spangled banner was soiled by Donald Trump last week, Barry.
It really was. That siege on the Capitol was something to behold. My goodness. And the upshot of that is still rolling out. So interesting to watch that one.
He is, he's a man who's always loved records. He's always loved firsts. But I think his legacy, Barry, as quite possibly the only American president to be impeached twice, is one that is going to be ignominious and is going to be really, it sullies the Trump name for generations.
Yeah, it's something you could have done without. And in truth, seeing all sorts of sports stars saying that they're not going for certain honors that he had offered them. And in his earlier part of his term, when champions of various leagues in America refused to go to the White House, just shows that he was such a divisive, he's not dead. He is such a divisive figure, and more so now after the incidences of last week.
And here's the thing, Barry. I think the pointer for me is that guys like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is a Republican. He's of course the head coach at the New England Patriots. So aptly named because Patriots is a term that Trump loves to use. He loves to identify that with his set of supporters. And he initially actually took the New England Patriots to the White House when Donald Trump initially stepped into America's seat of power. And I remember they presented Donald Trump with a helmet of the New England Patriots. But for a guy who's seen largely in sporting circles and in American circles, because he's such an iconic figure, as being a staunch Republican, a staunch conservative, for him to have turned down the Medal of Honor, which Donald Trump was planning to give him this week, I think is just an indicator of how low Donald Trump has fallen, even amongst the staunchest of Republicans and conservatives. So the last week, Barry, that he's enjoying in office, as it were, it's one where, I think America has been given an opportunity just to recalibrate, just to take a look at themselves in the mirror and say, are we really the great hope of the world? Yes. Are we really the land of hope and dreams? And I think Trump, in many ways, has taken away the gloss from the United States of America. And many sports stars, Barry, have been speaking out against this. And what I love is that people are finally beginning to realize that Colin Kaepernick, he was right after all. He
was right all along,
LeBron James has been right. Those sports stars that have been calling Donald Trump for the bigot and the racist that he is, have been proved right. And the Republicans finally are beginning to acknowledge that.
And a man that you mentioned, LeBron James, of course, he turns out for the Los Angeles Lakers. And we're talking NBA now. They've regained their top spot in the Western Conference standings after their win over the Houston Rockets early this morning. The Lakers look set to continue their last season's heroics that saw them end their decade-long wait for the NBA championship. And LeBron James, the man you mentioned, was at the center of winning them that ring last season. So obviously it's a good place for us to jump off with the champions from last time out and starting out on a very good note in the Western Conference this time out.
Yeah, absolutely, Barry. And you've got to say that the Lakers, I think, they're going to play the season because this is a season that's different from any other season. There are no fans in the auditoriums, in the arenas, and there's always, of course, the issue of the coronavirus that's going to be wreaking havoc with rosters. It's about managing yourself during the regular season to get yourself to the playoffs and then give yourself a genuine chance of bagging glory. A lot of us will admit that not a lot of people had the Lakers as their favorites during the regular season last season. Okay,
sure.
Not a lot of people had the Lakers. We all thought, you know what, they might just do the business in the West, or they're probably going to be knocked out by the Clippers, because we had one or two teams that looked better than them in the West, and we certainly had two or so teams that looked their equal out in the East. So no one gave them that tag. And that's the thing, Barry, about guys who set out a goal, and the goal is about winning a championship. It's not really about looking good in the regular season. It's about building up enough momentum and managing your roster to make sure that you are in the best shape to challenge when it matters, and that is during the playoffs. And I think that's the same approach that we're going to see from the Lakers, where they may not look convincing. They may not look like the best side in the regular season, but it's all about getting to the playoffs. And when you get to the playoffs, you win the games that matter. That is where players like LeBron James, like Anthony Davis come to the fore.
Do you see the NBA going back into the bubble concept, given the rise of coronavirus positive tests? Of course, you're talking about roster management. Now, roster management has got another dimension to it. I mean, you're looking beyond fatigue of players. You're looking at recovery of players. No, you now have to consider coronavirus, where players are unavailable for teams. Do you see the NBA, for them to carry on with the season, possibly adopting the bubble concept that they did at the back end of last season?
For nations like America, Barry, it's just a logistical decision. It's really not about resources. It's not about facilities, because they've done it before, they can afford it, and they can do it again. So it will come down to them just making a logistical decision, and that logistical decision will be supported by science. It will be supported by fact. It will be supported by the data that they're receiving from the franchises in terms of, okay, look at what the coronavirus is doing to us right now. Whilst we're not in the bubble, we perhaps need to get into the bubble, because we are now down to 8 players. We're now down to 9 players. We need more players in order to be effective. So if the time comes when they need to make that call, they can make that call easily, Barry. They can return to Orlando. They can return to Florida and do it again. They have the resources. They have the capacity. So it's not a problem for them.
I know it's early doors, but I'd like to get your thoughts on the MVP race. Let's call it the early MVP race. Steph Curry, my goodness, he had that 62-pointer. Was that possibly a pointer towards what he wants to do this season? Back fit and well able to push his Golden State Warriors all the way?
Yeah, listen, Steph will always be Steph, Barry. He'll always be a fantastic player. When he's fully fit, he's arguably the most entertaining player out in the NBA. So I think in the early running, and it's still too early for us to be talking about the MVP in truth, but in the early running, you know, you've called horse races before at Borodale Racecourse, and there's always that initial burst in the first 500 yards, the first 400, 600 yards. So let's talk about that as far as basketball is concerned. So this is the initial burst. In the initial burst, you've got to say that Steph Curry right now is leading the line. His performances have been absolutely fantastic. For a Golden State Warriors side, that's not expected to challenge, because they really have just 2 key players in Steph and Draymond Green. They don't have, the experience that a Klay Thompson would bring and a hot shooting hand that he is. So they're not expected to go very far. But the reason why they're winning games and putting on some decent shows right now is because of Steph Curry, because when he's hot, he's virtually unstoppable. But also when teams find a way of playing Steph Curry and making sure that he doesn't get the ball in hand, then the Golden State Warriors are going to struggle. We saw them beat the Clippers. The Clippers are a very good side. They were able to beat them. But last night, they lost to the Indiana Pacers, a team that you'd have thought, hang on, if the Warriors are playing this way, they should be able to beat the Pacers. But they weren't able to do that, and mainly because they were able to keep Steph Curry down to just 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. So he was well shackled. And when Steph Curry is well shackled, the Golden State Warriors are going to struggle to win games.
What about the man, your early impressions of the man who everyone says is living in LeBron's shadow, but some say is more important to the Lakers than LeBron himself, Anthony Davis, AD?
Yeah, well, Barry, I think AD is really not interested in these legacy issues. I think players like AD, whilst he knows his worth, he knows his quality, he knows his ability, I think he just wants those rings on his hand. And as long as the Lakers are able to win championships, I don't think he's too worried whether people say that LeBron James is the more important player on the team than you are. I don't think he wants to be the main man on the team. He's quite content living in LeBron's shadow. He knows that as a partnership, as a team, they're probably the best going right now in the NBA.
All to play for, all to watch in the NBA, and the big names are putting up big numbers. Steph Curry, of course, that 62-pointer being a marker to say that Steph is back.
Hi, my name is Luke Bahamute, Los Angeles Clippers small forward, and you're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Still in the States, from the NBA, we go to the NFL. That is obviously American football, if you didn't know. Now, with the Super Bowl next month, we're down to 4 games in the divisional round playoffs. This is after the Super Wildcard weekend lived up to its billing with upsets and back and forth point fests. Now, Barry, have you been following the NFL? Have you been keeping an eye on what's been happening?
Yeah, just one eye, I suppose, has been a cursory glance as to what's happening in the NFL. Followed the exploits of the Buffalo Bills, the likes of the Cleveland Browns, doing well in and getting to the playoffs for the first time in a long time, snapping losing runs. So yeah, it's been interesting to watch.
Okay, let's talk about the New England Patriots, Barry, because at about this time of the season, their name would be very prominent in almost every discussion. But the Patriots are not in the playoffs. They're not going to be there. Tom Brady left them last season. They replaced him with Cam Newton. He came in. He looked the part initially. First couple of games, Cam Newton looked like he was the guy who was going to pick up that mantle. And it's a heavy one because we talk about Tom Brady, arguably the GOAT, a name right up there with the likes of Joe Montana. I love that name. And so Cam Newton comes in there with his razz, with his style, with his quirkiness. He's embraced by the New England Patriot fans. And then he suffers, unfortunately, from a COVID infection. He comes back and he was never the same player. And the team, their fortunes plummeted as a result, and they don't make the playoffs. Do you think that the franchise is panicking? And do you think that they'll be rethinking the engagement with Newton?
No. I don't think that the franchise is panicking. They know the quality that they got when they traded him in, and I think that look, the New England Patriots will always be the New England Patriots. Remember, they've got Bill Belichick, a man who can figure it out. Okay, if there's anything,
he's the Fergie of the NFL, isn't he?
He's the Fergie of the NFL. If there's anything that needs to be figuring out, who do you want to figure it out? Bill Belichick will figure it out and get it right. I don't think there's any panic. Yes, first time missing out on playoffs since 2008, but in truth, what it is an opportunity to circle the wagons, get into a team huddle and see how they fix it going forward. And I'm glad you mentioned the mitigating circumstances, that COVID infection. In truth, we don't know the full extent of COVID and how it can affect someone's physiology, but certainly Cam Newton wasn't the same player when he came back.
Well, the guy who left, Tom Brady, Barry, we've talked about him. We said he's arguably the GOAT. He leaves the Patriots. He goes over to the Bucks, the Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Bucks. That is the franchise that is owned by the Glazers. Who are the Glazers? The owners of Manchester United. That was a struggling franchise. In fact, it was actually reflective of Manchester United's struggles in the English Premier League. Tom Brady signs for the Bucks, and guess what? Bucks are in the playoffs, and many people are tipping them to go all the way.
Yeah, and almost juxtaposed diametrically, almost in parallels with the fortunes of the New England Patriots. Because as you said earlier, Cam Newton started like a house on fire, seemed to be the business. There was flair, there was pizzazz, there was panache. The Bucks didn't start so great, and everybody was saying, Tom Brady is done. Here we are.
So does this speak about how good Tom Brady is as a player, Barry?
It really does. It really does, because in truth, when you go to a struggling franchise, a franchise that has had years and years of frustration, you are the change that has caused the fortunes of that franchise to change. So do we just say that, oh, it was happenstance? No, we assign it to the man who has come in, Tom Brady, certainly one of those that we got to consider as in the conversation about GOATship.
How long do you think he can go? Just very quickly, do you think that this is his last chance to win another Super Bowl? Because if you take a look at the young guns, Barry, that are coming in, you got Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, all those guys. Those are the new young guns, and they're beginning to dominate. Is there a sense that this is perhaps the last chance that Brady has got to win another Super Bowl?
Look, in truth, just being a fan of Tom Brady, I would like to say that there might be another chance, but certainly when you look at the exploits of Patrick Mahomes out of the Chiefs, there is certainly that sense that it's now or never for Tom Brady, because those young guns that you mentioned earlier are certainly doing the business at a higher level.
Okay, those young guns will be featuring in the divisional playoffs. In the AFC, we've got the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills, the Cleveland Browns at Kansas City Chiefs, and then in the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams are at Green Bay Packers, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at the New Orleans Saints. The winners advance to the conference championships.
Hi, my name is Rune Shamba, Mytoria's super striker. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
The big leagues, the big teams, the big players. The beautiful game on ZiFM Sport.
All right, after that therapeutic dive into the States, let's go into the beautiful game where we are starting in England now. OGS, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He's relishing Sunday's showdown with Liverpool and insists his players are ready for, quote, a great test after Manchester United claimed top spot in the Premier League. Paul Pogba's deflected second-half volley secured a 1-0 victory over Burnley at Turf Moor that saw United open up a 3-point cushion over the champions ahead of their clash on Sunday. Mike, it couldn't have been scripted better. The old enemies, Manchester United and Liverpool. Manchester United has just claimed top spot. They meet on Sunday. Gonna be a good one. What would you say about United so far? They have confounded a lot of their critics, haven't they?
Yeah, from a results perspective, not necessarily from swashbuckling play. I don't think their play has been really fantastic. They haven't blown teams off the park. But Barry, what you need in a league marathon, you need results to go your way. And United has found a way to win matches. And that, for me, Barry, is a sign of improvement. You don't always need to play well in order to win matches. And if United can keep this going, I think they'll be able to be thereabouts towards the end of the season.
Make a call. Make a call now. Can you say that Manchester United potentially could be champions?
Well, Barry, you can't say they can't be potentially champions when they are now on top of the standings. So potentially they can be champions. But I'm taking a look at Manchester City. I think Man City have turned a corner. They've got a very mean defense at the moment. They may not be the same overwhelming attacking force that they were a couple of seasons ago, but they are starting to also win matches and they're starting to get goals. So if Manchester City hit their straps, I consider them to be slight favourites ahead of Liverpool. Because for Liverpool, Barry, to be in this position, with the amount of injuries they've suffered, with the amount of setbacks they've suffered, with players in and out. Alisson has been out for a long time. Van Dijk has been out since the Merseyside derby. Thiago Alcantara has only recently returned. Matip has been out. You mentioned every player at Liverpool, they've been out. So with the setbacks that they have, and for them to be in this position where they are second, and with an opportunity to play Manchester United, knowing that if they win at Anfield on Sunday, they go back to the top of the standings because of their goal difference. I think Liverpool are not going to be confirming because I'm not going to be complaining, because I think Liverpool are going to get progressively better and better as they head towards the end of the season. However, I think Klopp should seriously consider perhaps buying a centre-back, because Liverpool's problems are defensive.
Yes.
That's where the problems are. You're playing Fabinho, sometimes you're having to play Jordan Henderson in central defense, meaning that you've got no recognized centre-backs in your team. And how long can Liverpool keep this up? Can they do it to win the title? If they did win the title, Barry, with this squad and with no additions in defense, this will be Jurgen Klopp's greatest achievement yet.
I would agree certainly with that. In terms of achievements, quick one, where has Ole Gunnar Solskjaer got it right in your view?
Bruno Fernandes, Barry. He is the guy that manages to win matches more often than not for Manchester United. But Paul Pogba is returning to form. Over the last month, we've seen Paul Pogba beginning to play with confidence. And we saw him win the game for United versus Burnley last night. And if he can get a Bruno Fernandes playing well and Paul Pogba playing well, which means that the burden is not entirely on Bruno Fernandes, that when Bruno Fernandes plays badly, like he did versus Burnley, and had to be pulled off, then you've got Paul Pogba as a potential match winner. That, for me, I think is the key for Manchester United. And also United knowing who they are and their strengths. They're playing counter-attacking football. They're not trying to dominate teams. They're trying to heat teams on the break, the ball behind the defense. That is what has played dividend for Manchester United. It'll be interesting to see their approach versus Liverpool.
Absolutely. So it's going to be an interesting one on Sunday. We'll preview for it. We'll probably preview it for you.
We definitely will.
Because that's going to be a good one. There are other results last night. Sheffield United, first 3 points of the season. 1-0 winners over Newcastle. And then Everton, 2-1 winners at Molineux against Wolves. Everton look like they are the business under Carlo Ancelotti. Tonight's fixtures, Manchester City takes on Brighton, while Tottenham entertain Fulham in a London derby. A small one, but still a London derby. Let's go to Spain, Mikey. Sevilla coach Julen Lopetegui delivered a backhanded compliment to Atletico Madrid after his side were beaten 2-0 by La Liga leaders last night, saying Diego Simeone's side are good at defending as well as making the most of their few chances. He's got games in hand, Diego Simeone, and he's at the top of La Liga. What a perfect position this is, isn't it?
Perfect position, Barry, and he won't mind, those cheeky digs from the likes of Julen Lopetegui. All he's worried about is getting points on the board, the points that could land Atletico Madrid a title. I mean, you need only look, Barry, at the standings in Spain, where things are. Especially after last night's result. And this is a game that Real Madrid and Barcelona were eyeing up as a potential slip-up for Diego Simeone's men, but not so, because if you take a look at the standings right now, they've got a 4-point lead over Real Madrid, who are in second place, but they've played 2 matches less. If they win their 2 games in hand, it means that they've got a 10-point lead at the top of the standings, and that 10-point lead will also be a 13-point lead over Barcelona. So can the other teams claw their way back? If Atletico Madrid carries on winning matches, it'll be very, very, very difficult, Barry. Diego Simeone's side, classically, very stingy, very mean defensively, and they look like they found that old meanness back, and they may be very difficult to break down this season.
Indeed, it'll be an almighty implosion by Atletico Madrid to see them not win the title in Spain. Let's wrap it up in Italy, where Juventus get their Coppa Italia campaign underway tonight when they welcome fellow Serie A side Genoa to the Allianz Stadium. The Bianconeri were losing finalists in last season's competition, beaten on penalties by Napoli, but may view the cup as their best chance of winning a trophy in Andrea Pirlo's first campaign as manager. And this is largely as a result of AC Milan, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, but I think Juventus themselves, Barry, are not too far behind. They'll be looking. They beat AC Milan, I think, a couple of weeks ago. They got a really big game versus Internazionale this weekend. That clash against Inter. I think it's one where it could make or break Andrea Pirlo as a manager. And it could make or break Juventus' chances to defend their title this season. They lose that game, I think it'll be very difficult for them to catch up to the Milan teams. But if they win it, they'll feel that, listen, we are winning the matches that matter. Because if you're able to beat your direct title rivals, then you give yourself a chance at winning that title. And that is what Juventus classically have been able to do over the last 3 seasons. When they've played Napoli, when they played Atalanta, when they played Roma, AC Milan, Internazionale, they've managed to beat those teams home and away. And when you do that, you give yourself the best chance of winning the title, which is why in England, Liverpool will be eyeing this game versus Manchester United, knowing that, you know what, if we beat United, as we have been doing over the last few seasons, then we're back.
Absolutely back. And of course, you'll recall that in Italy, Juventus all but has a franchise.
Bayern Munich, Barry. Bayern Munich do the same thing, isn't it?
In Germany,
in Germany, where they may drop points to Hoffenheim, drop points to the likes of Borussia Mönchengladbach, but in the games that matter, versus Dortmund, versus Leipzig, they win those games. And that's what wins them the title, because you are in essence subtracting 6 points from your rivals.
Well, tomorrow's our shortened show, but this is giving you a small introduction into what we'll be looking at on Friday, because we look at the soccer leagues come Friday and preview the weekend for you. Other fixtures in Italy: Fiorentina takes on Inter Milan, Napoli takes on Empoli. We're out of time, so we have to go. We're back tomorrow for the 30-minute show. May God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manandi, out.
And it's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
The biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.